My name again is Tom Machamer. I operate a 55,000 gallon research system. My goal here is to explain some of that equipment and some of the challenges I've had over the last 5 years. So, talk louder? Okay, I can do that. Keep doing that though. I raise bass, perch, bluegill, red-eared sunfish, anything you can make money with. So that's my crop. What do we see here? Are they healthy? Look at that nice belly. There's no pink. They're not stressed, right? They look good. Everybody agree? They look good. You know what I see there? A lot of work. A lot of work. There's a lot of work from that little fry to that point right there. So all those newbies, this is what you want to pay attention to. It's a lot of work. Right, Chris?
Yes.
Okay, an overview of my culture system. We start the fish in here, either 1,500 gallon tanks. Once they grow out of these, we'll put them in the finishing tanks. And this is a holding and a finishing tank as well. Real cheap tanks there. A whole, what, $300, but it's the way you filter it is the challenge. Filter overview. We'll start with a solid separator over here. We're going to have another picture of that a little up close. But then the water flows through the Hydrotech, drum screen. Big stuff there, smaller stuff there. Then it gets pumped over into the bead filters, and then that polishes it. And once it goes into the degas towers, you can take a glass of water and hold it up, and there's hardly anything in there. So you're not getting that particulate in the gills of your fish and all the other things that cause diseases. So the degas there, we're taking out CO2, and then we pump it back in to a oxygen contactor or biocontactor. We'll see a big picture of that here in a minute. But that's what we're trying to do. Those that have fish know that those are happy fish. They're not jumping out to get the feed, they're just feeding. The water quality, even though they're moving around, is right there. Okay, start construction. A couple things to learn. Make sure you've got a good flat sand bed if you're going to use those cheap liners. Because sooner or later, something's going to work up through that liner. Yeah, I know people, throw a tarp out in the grass and they use it for a couple years and then it collapses and they throw it away. I don't want this thing collapsing at 2 o'clock in the morning on me because something poked a hole in it. 2 drains. All the tanks I have 2 drains. It'll end up having a bottom drain and a top drain. That's one of the contactors for this unit. You can see the other one back here. Something else I want to point out that is real helpful are these side stream flow meters. That way I can have 300 pounds of fish in this one. I can have 100 pounds in this one. It gives you the ability to fluctuate those. I have the bulk of the oxygen will end up coming through, well, it'll be over here, through the oxygen contactor. But once the fish get bigger, they have more demand for oxygen. You need a way to supplement that oxygen. A lot of pipe. Like I said, every tank has 2 drains. Top drain, bottom drain. That's one side. That's the other side, plus all the pipe going out to the tanks. Over a mile of pipe. liquid level controller, real handy. I'll talk about that in a minute. All those drains that we talked about come up from the bottom. Come up from the bottom of the tank or the top drain, but they all come out right there. Really nice to watch, and I'll show you. You'll like this one. See those bass fecal pellets? Oh, I think that's exciting.
I do too.
See how big it is? Well, of course it's this big now. But it's much easier for the filters to take that out or settle it out. Once you run it through a pump, not so easy. Not so easy. Top drain, bottom drain. I fed probably a half hour ago. I don't remember, that was 4 years ago. But definitely a difference. Obviously bigger fish. Smaller fish, you'd have more coming out of your top drain. That's the solid separator. You're bringing the water up from the bottom, which was the raceway over there. Oops. I'm trying. With just these 2 pipes, but we're taking it out with 4. So you've really slowed that volume down, giving it time to settle out down there before it can get picked back up. You really want to distribute that energy as much as you can. Talked about a drum screen. It's almost a must. It's expensive, but if you're going to take the plunge, you might as well do it right. Discharge, and then there's 6 pipes in here that pick up. I have low head pumps, and I'll pick the water up and take it over to the feed filters. You really don't need feed filters. I just got it for so cheap, and we put them in to help. I probably would have needed a bigger hydrotech, but you really don't need those. Pumping station, I have 16 low head pumps that move the water. About 500 gallons a minute, a little more than 500 gallons a minute. Distributor, we have 2 of those. This one's above ground, the other one's below ground. I have 2 pumping stations. Oxygen contactor, I put my oxygen in down here, and if that oxygen tries to go up, that bead gets in the way, and so the residence time in those tanks, it gets absorbed into the water instead of it just bubbling out. Another expense is monitoring. If you want to be able to sleep at night, you need to talk to YSI and develop a system that if you have low oxygen, low water, high water, whatever the case is, if you've got $80,000 worth of fish sitting in the barn, you want to take care of them. Right, Greg? Yeah. So that's what the equipment does. Gives you a quality fish to sell to your customers. But it's not easy. A lot of monitoring happens. A lot of planning happens. You're going to build a system. Curtis is shaking his head. Every little detail, you know, that 2-inch valve, it's a lot easier to put in print and just when you know you need it, then just put the drain pipe in, and I forgot to put it in. Now it's under 2 foot of sand. Not fun, not fun. So good planning is a must. And here's the big one. I got plenty of time, don't I?
Yeah, you have time.
Data. Especially you folks that are just starting out, you want to collect a lot of information. You want a daily obviously check your oxygen because these fish are growing. You want to take care of your pH, your salinity, your CO2, your alkalinity, your total ammonia, nitrites, nitrates, all of that you want to keep track of. And you can see it move. It's fun. Once it starts to grow, you can see all those numbers change. And you have to adjust, obviously your oxygen, because these fish are growing and they're secreting and they're changing pH and doing all that fun stuff. Keep track of your morts. How many of you document your morts every day? Good. Look at that. 41, not so good. Black crappie. 46, black crappie. 42, 51. Houston, we have a problem. What do you think? Major disease breakout? No idea. Overcrowding. Overcrowding. You pull these off the screen and you have secondary fungus or some other issue. So what happened to that fish? Usually stressed them out. I don't know if I brought that paper. No. Well, I'll try to explain it. There's a big difference between 10,000 6-inch fish, which is say 1,000 pounds. You can put in 5,000 gallons of water. You can put 2,000 pounds, twice as many pounds in there of 12-inch fish, or 2 per pound. Twice the mass, but half the heads. And my point here is, once you start seeing these, unless you have a good chart, from somebody that's experienced it, when you start seeing these morts, it's time to, if you can't figure out what the problem is, yeah, you can send them away and get them diagnosed, and then you lose more. Best thing to go in there, salt them, move them, space them out again. You'll learn your system and what density they'll take. It's not always I got a major disease. 50 fish and 1,500 gallons of water, that's a lot of mortality. So that's just a little trick I've learned that, watch your density. You can still grow fish at, a half a gallon, half a pound per gallon, or some guys will push it a lot more than that. Right, Mark? You push it a little more than that? Time consuming. If you're not willing to spend 3 hours a day, how many hours a day do you guys spend cleaning and monitoring and
I'm there all day.
Yep, all that stuff. A minimum of 3 hours. And that's just monitoring water quality and some cleaning. So those that are thinking of building a system, make sure you tell your spouse what you're doing and bring her to the next meeting and I'll talk to her. Because that's a daily list right there. And that's just the daily stuff. There's other things that happen a couple times a week. Other things to consider. Business plan. Oh, I want to raise fish. Boy, I like Tom's fish. Did you see those red ears? Those were sexy, weren't they? Sitting in there. No, I could sell those. You might want to have them sold before you put them in, before you even spend the first penny. My suggestion, if you're not sure, help somebody else first. Work for somebody else first. So that's the marketing. Cash flow. I've got $250,000 in my retirement plan. Boy, I could spend half of that and I can double it in a year. Not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. So if you can't lose it, don't spend it. System design. Make sure you've looked at a lot of systems, and your system will be unique for your barn or your area. And again, water quality. It takes a lot of time to keep track of all those things so they don't sneak up and bite you. Questions?
When you, so the central tanks that you have were your kind of starter tanks, is that right? And then you move them over into the larger tanks and finish them out?
Yep.
I couldn't see from that picture, but like, do you have different age fish stocked throughout those 5 or 6 central tanks? And then do you move that whole tank over to the next one?
They'll get graded out, so like some of the small ones will go back into that central row, but the big ones will go over. Usually there's 2 or 3 tanks of the similar size, especially with largemouth bass. You have to grade them several times, or they just eat each other.
With the, like, how long do you find it takes in the RAS system to get your bass to market size?
Well, my market size is 6 to 8 inches. I can bring
So you
them
sell to like sport fishing type thing, or where?
recreational pond stockers. Yeah. Yep.
And then, so do you have a hard time, does that schedule work out that, you know, they're not, I guess fingerlings aren't available all year round, right? So do you have a hard time with that management cycle?
No, you get them in from Arkansas or a local source. Trying to do some of my own. Not working so good. Especially to get uniform fish. You know, you need 10,000, but they all have to be the same size, 2-inch fish. You don't want to have your buddy saying out his pond and get you 4 inches and 2 inches and 1 inch. It won't work. So anyway, yeah, we put 10,000 in those 1,500 gallons of water. You know, 3 or 4 weeks later, we're in there grading them, pulling the big boys out. If there's enough growth, and if I have 20,000, I'll put them in a 5,000 gallon tank. And then they'll get graded one more time as well. More questions?
Are you able to grade them as you fish it?
Yeah.
Can you net only the size you want?
No, you have to take them all out.
Tom, will you repeat the question?
Oh, how do you grade your fish basically? Can you just get some device and just net the big ones out? That would be pretty hard on them, so we just net the whole thing out, but we'll throw them in the next closest tank. And if we have 2 sizes, we'll put a cage in there, a floating cage, and grade those out as well. So you can have 2 or 3 sizes without too much trouble. More questions? Gene?
Before you build a RAS farm, do you recommend people have the source water well tested for chemistry so that you can calculate your cost of doing business to replace calcium carbonate, alkalinity, and trace minerals?
Very good point. If you go down south to Arkansas, Matt can tell you, some of those guys have to treat for iron and all kinds of things. And they're talking a large volume of water. So that's a cost that they have that I don't have. Not as much anyway.
How many labor hours you get order to cash?
I mean, labor hours. And that's 3 hours a day. That's just during the week. You know, there's still, you know, Sunday afternoon you go out and do extra cleaning, or you fix something that was broken or whatever. So you do the calculations, I didn't even calculate it, but that's a good point. Calculate how many hours a year you put in that barn. That's what I'm saying. You need to talk to your spouse before you build one.
Fish eggs to fish selling, the hours.
Oh.
From eggs to selling, order to cash.
Hour-wise? Time-wise?
Hour-wise, like it takes 2 months to grow the fish and that's all.
Well, I get them in 2 inches in September, October, and by March I'm starting to sell 6 days. So September, October, November, December, January, February, March. 6-inch fish, 7 months. And people will pay more for recreational than they will for food, usually. Any of the Joneses here? No, no. Mark's saying, yeah, that's true.
It's true.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Could you tell us a little bit about doing grab samples to calculate your daily feed change as the fish gain biomass?
Once a week, go through, and that's why it's nice to have all that data. Find me. You document how much feed you're giving each tank. You add it up, and you feed the gain, because ballpark, now there's other calculations, but about 80% of that feed gets converted to some type of flesh. 508, let's put it that way. So you can calculate 100 pounds. If you fed 100 pounds, next week you're going to be feeding 80 pounds. Is that what you're looking for? Okay. You're going to be feeding 80 pounds. So you need to increase your feed rate to satisfy that extra 80 pounds you just added. And then the following week it'll be 83 or whatever. You know, you just add it up times 0.80, and that'll give you your rough. But if they're not feeding well that day, you might want to see why they're not feeding, because every day mine feed the same. They're just pretty consistent. So something's up if they're not feeding. Yeah, Mark.
Calculate how much feed you feed every day based on assumed biomass, and you have a new calculation every day. How much feed you feed
No, I only do it once a week.
once a week.
Yeah. 3 hours a day is enough.
All right, so you will calculate once a week how much increase for that week, so feed that rate per day all week long.
Yep.
Okay. We weigh out that feed carefully for each day, each time.
Yep.
how much you feed.
Anybody else?
You ever take sample weights, like maybe 4 or 6, and weighing it and see what comes up in that same?
We're doing feed studies right now, and a couple of those center row tanks, we'll see 2 different ones, and we're taking full samples out there every week. The main crop, probably once a month. Not on a regular basis. Getting pretty good at it. You're doing it every week.
You guys have, in Kentucky, we can sell, like, our fish and wildlife advantages, all the tom stopping, the small fish stuff. So if you, like, do you have any biosecurity issues when you're stocking like natural waters, whether it's restored or otherwise?
I can do it with private water. I don't, maybe somebody else knows, I don't know if any rules. We do
There's
have-
no regulations that say you have to undergo like testing or anything like that.
Cross state lines, or different cross state lines, there's testing. Sort of approach.
Unless Tom sells to Jones Fish, companies like Jones, every species has to be VHS tested. So if he wants to sell to Jones, yeah, they have to. Pardon me?
Because they're shipping out of state.
Correct. Well, yeah.
Just had a quick question about sterilization or disinfection. You mentioned a number of different species you've raised in the system. Do you disinfect it all before you add a new species in? Or, I mean, do you
I don't,
have
probably
to
do
worry
it.
about that?
I have some nice outside holding tanks, so something.
Or like a quarantine?
Yeah, quarantine tank, it's just they flow through well water, so something suspicious, we'll put it in there. You know, you're coming up from Arkansas with the little guys, and you're hoping they do their homework, that's why you deal with the same opportunity or Malone or whoever you're dealing with, because they've been consistent. Hopefully they have some biosecurity. And you go down, and that's a good point. If you are, thinking of this, go down and talk with these guys, see how they do it, see what their biosecurity is.
And make sure the fish all tested?
Yes. It starts dealing with the little guys. I still think they're all tested, but that doesn't mean they don't have other issues. Well, come on, Steve, you have to handle me on something. Thank you.